And we're kicking off with AEW, as MJF is known for his interesting interactions with fans, and fans will remember him throwing a drink on a fan during the Revolution pay-per-view. This week's episode of AEW Dynamite opened with MJF versus Adam Cole in a championship contender match, and yet again, the AEW World Champion turned his attention to those at ringside. During the match, MJF smacked a fan at ringside and knocked the glasses right off his face, and this incident hardly went unnoticed by those in attendance or those watching at home. One fan commented on social media that this fan has grounds for a lawsuit and said they should file a police report after the show over being smacked by MJF. While it's possible that this fan was a plant, we can't say that for certain, and MJF once again proved to be a master of villainy both in and out of the ring. MJF is paid a lot of money to be a heel in AEW, but is this week's incident another case of him going too far? Or is it all justified in AEW's efforts to make MJF one of the most hated stars competing today? AEW Dynamite came to Washington, D.C. this week in the final episode of Dynamite ahead of the launch of AEW Collision, and there was a surprising name backstage in the U.S. Capitol. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select reports that Jimmy Jacobs was backstage at Dynamite, and it was hinted by sources that the former WWE writer and current Impact writer provided help. The report said that Jimmy Jacobs being at the show was a bit of a surprise, and that there were a lot of hugs between Jacobs and a lot of people at the show. Jacobs was with WWE as part of Creative from March 2015 to October 2017 before he was fired for taking a photo with the Bullet Club members who did an invasion outside an episode of Raw. A month after his departure, he signed with Impact Wrestling and has been a key part of the company since then, even appearing on a video on their official Twitter this week. It's unclear if Jacobs was just at Dynamite to say hello, or if there were some other plans at work, but folks in AEW were pleased to see him, which bodes well for Jacobs if he's angling for a new job. We are just days away from the launch of AEW Collision, and while anticipation is high for this Saturday's show, that excitement isn't being shared with future tapings. AEW's ticket sales for Collision later this month have been woeful, with one show in the wrestling hotbed of Ontario doing under 1,000 tickets in a bad omen for the new programming. Speaking to Post Wrestling this week, Tony Khan was asked about Collision and the underwhelming ticket sales for upcoming events, and praised the sales for this week's event in Chicago. He said, "I think really with these Collision events, people don't know what to expect. We've got a really strong number for the show in Chicago that's going to turn out to be one of the biggest TVs we've done all year." It's become something of a staple of Tony Khan to ignore anything that does not show his brand in a positive light, as we all saw with his response to last year's infamous All Out show. Tony Khan is very happy with how the premiere episode of Collision is doing, but is keeping quiet about the other shows, and we'll have to see what the future holds for AEW's next wrestling show. For months, Bray Wyatt has been absent from WWE programming, and there's been a ton of questions about his future with the promotion. Despite a strong response upon returning at Extreme Rules last October, Wyatt's run has been underwhelming since then, but could he be about to debut for AEW? During the 8-man tag team match on this week's Dynamite, the word "no" appeared on the screen, much to the surprise of everybody watching. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful commented on it, saying that it happened on all broadcasts and was not just a distributor or cable error, meaning AEW deliberately meant for the no on the show. On Twitter, fans speculated that this is the first tease of Bray Wyatt's arrival in AEW, with some comparing it to the low-key promoting of Bray Wyatt last year ahead of his WWE return. Some fans also speculated that the "no" isn't just a word in and of itself, but rather the start of a cohesive message, which will be quite literally spelled out on upcoming episodes of AEW programming. Despite not appearing in months, there's been no word of Wyatt being released by WWE, and do you think this "no" is the start of his arrival in AEW? Share your thoughts in the comments down below. It's hardly a surprise that some fans are eager to see Wyatt in AEW, as his time in WWE since returning has hardly gone smooth. The last we saw of Bray, he was feuding with Bobby Lashley in a storyline that had to be dropped, but now his return to WWE TV could be about to happen. On Twitter, BWE teased Wyatt's return, sharing an animated GIF of an animation that played when fans clicked on one of those QR codes during Wyatt's return hype. The animated GIF in question showed that White Rabbit digging a hole where X marked the spot, leaving fans wondering how long of a wait Bray's Wyatt return will be. Wyatt has been removed from WWE's internal roster, which some have seen as a sign of his exit, but it appears something is in the works, and we'll keep following his situation for further updates. At Night of Champions, Bianca Belair's record-long reign as Raw Women's Champion came to an end, and many have been curious as to what's next for the EST. Belair has been one of WWE's top babyfaces ever since she came to the main roster in 2020, but it may be time for the former champion to embrace her more villainous side. BWE, the proven WWE insider, shared an interesting note behind his private Twitter account, and it seems that WWE has plans in the work to turn Belair heel. If so, it won't just be the EST who becomes a HEEL, but the report also suggested that the Street Profits would be turning with her, forming a new faction in the process. This isn't the first time we've heard of plans for Belair and the Profits to turn heel, and it'd be interesting to see how the trio fares after years of being established babyfaces. Belair already has a connection with the Street Profits as she's married to Montez Ford, but would you like to see these three superstars as heels? Let us know in the comments. Last September, AEW was rocked by the events of All Out, and when the show was finished, the last thing people were thinking about was the wrestling. Given CM Punk's rant in the backstage fight that resulted in a police investigation, many have been curious about the future of All Out and whether the name would be retired. During an appearance on Barstool Wrestling, AEW President Tony Khan was asked that question, and despite the controversy, saw no reason to hold off on another All Out. He said, "We'd be approaching the 5th annual All Out, so I think it's safe to say that I'm not going to miss that kind of an opportunity. I'm waiting to confirm what people can expect, but certainly, we built a great tradition with All Out, and this is going to be the 5th year of it." The fact that Khan didn't even acknowledge the All Out 2022 controversy is hardly a surprise, as since the incident transpired, the AEW president has always refused to comment on last year's event. Before All Out, AEW has both Forbidden Door and All In coming up, and while Tony Khan is fine with pretending last year's controversy didn't happen, that may be easier said than done as we approach All Out. It's been 13 months since fans last saw Randy Orton in the ring, and for a while, it looked like the Legend Killer's legendary in-ring career had come to an end. Thankfully, more recent reports have been more positive, suggesting that a return for Orton is already in the works, but now the man himself has spoken about the end of his career. Sitting down with the Ringer Wrestling podcast, Orton was asked about whether he's considered retirement and addressed when he plans on hanging up his boots for good. He said, "I'm 41. By the time I'm 50, I think I'm done, but I'm not like, I'll do auditions every once in a while, but I almost only want to do them because my wife says, oh, do them, but because what if you don't? I would go out and have that last match when I'm 50 and be able to say I did it on my terms. That's 9 years from now, but I don't see an end to my career anytime soon. I'd like to continue to go." At 41, Orton has already had an incredible career, including 14 reigns as world champion, and many believe that if there is somebody who will surpass the 16 reigns of Ric Flair and John Cena, it's the Viper. Each time Roman Reigns appears on WWE programming, he demands that the audience acknowledge him, and it's hard not to, considering his success. With over 1,000 days as Universal Champion, several WrestleMania main events, a Royal Rumble win, and a Grand Slam record to his name, Reigns' success is rightfully acknowledged, but how did this catchphrase begin? While speaking with Rick Rubin on the Tetragrammation podcast, Paul Heyman disclosed that the phrase came about during Reigns' feud with Jey Uso early on into his reinvention as the Tribal Chief. Reigns explained that for the story, he didn't want Jey to love or hate him, but to simply acknowledge him as the head of the table, and that is the moment that things clicked. Heyman went on to explain that the simple two-word catchphrase defines Reigns' character perfectly, as it makes sense for the Tribal Chief to seek acknowledgement by those working under him. While countless fans are willing to acknowledge their Tribal Chief, tensions continue to boil over in the bloodline, and expect things to come to a head when Reigns returns on this Friday's SmackDown. And we're ending with AEW's Fight Forever, which will finally release on consoles later this month, and this week, fans caught their first glimpse at how ladder matches will operate in the game. In footage shared online, the team at New Legacy Inc. played a ladder match between Paul White and John Silver, a staple of wrestling games, and showed off features in the match and the entrances of both men. Expectations are high for AEW Fight Forever, which will be the biggest wrestling game in decades to not be a WWE game, and after multiple delays, we seriously hope that Fight Forever was worth the wait.